Good evening. My name is Elaine. I'm a student here at Morgrave University, like yourself. I appreciate you meeting me here in the library for tutoring. Under different circumstances, I would have invited you to a more private space, but in this case, it's easier to simply pull the material off of the shelves rather than tasking you to bring all the books with you to every session. Dr. Decider mentioned that you're beginning to work on a minor in Theoretical Arcana. Is that right? May I ask what your major is? Applied Military Arts, with a minor in Theoretical Arcana. You must be studying to be an Eldritch Knight, am I correct? Yes, I suspected as much. You certainly have the build for it, if you don't mind my saying so. Well, unlike the military history and combat strategy courses you've likely been taking for your major, Theoretical Arcana is a bit more mentally taxing. There's going to be a lot of repetition, memorization, and, dare I say it, boredom. Since you haven't yet begun your formal education into wizardry just yet, we'll start with the basics and work our way up. We can start with cantrips. Cantrips within Arcanism are defined as... I'm sorry. No, I'm afraid you won't be learning how to cast any cantrips today, and certainly not in the library. Any spellcraft you get up to will be conducted in the controlled environment of one of the campus's laboratories, where various magical wards and a group of trained proctors will be able to ensure you don't accidentally blow up another student. This tutoring session will simply act as a primer for the practical and hands-on aspect you'll be focusing on in the lab. You have to think of wizardry like mathematics or the sciences. Before you can dive into the practical aspects of architecture and start drafting up plans for a building, you first have to dedicate your mind to learning and mastering basic geometric formulae and gain a solid grasp of engineering before you put it into any sort of practice. That is true here as well. Before you start waving an arcane focus around and using words of power to speak magic into existence, you first have to familiarize yourself with the basic concepts of each spell. Understand why the components are important, why some words of power are effective and some are not, and also understand the subtle sciences behind the spells. It is imperative before you begin that... Well, yes, it is a little boring, but to be fair, most of us wizards began our arcane education as teenagers, sometimes even younger, so the tedium was baked directly into our education, and thus was not as much of a problem. You, on the other hand, made the very conscious decision to study wizardry as an adult. You quite literally signed up for this. If it is just now dawning on you how much work and dedication will be required to study wizardry, then you will want to seriously consider if this is for you. We call it a discipline for a reason. Many wizards make magic look easy. They hold their spellbook, focus their might, babble some words in Draconic, and produce wonders. But so many people forget that even prestidigitation can take several months or even a year to truly reliably learn and reproduce. What's that? Prestidigitation is one of the cantrips you're going to learn in the early years. It allows you to subtly affect objects with minor arcane. Stop interrupting me and stay focused. I am trying to make a point. Now, where was I? Right. Discipline. Even the small spells require time to study and ample practice to work your way up towards. As an Eldritch Knight, you will not reach the same heights as your fellow dedicated wizards. You are dividing your time between the martial and the arcane. It is commendable, but you should also set reasonable expectations about your magical abilities. You are likely never going to see any high magic that your wizard contemporaries will master ahead of you. But that doesn't mean you cannot study it, recognize it, and learn to plan around it as you develop your approach to it. Are there any alternatives to learning wizardry? Well, I suppose we can discuss the basics of magic and the magical sciences before we delve directly into contribs. You'll have some weeks in the lab before you start casting anyway. I suppose we should cover what magic is before we go any further. First, I'd like to state that magic is not well defined. There are a dozen or so schools of thought on the finer points of magecraft and magery. Ultimately, magic is a sort of additional rule set that layers our world. By twisting the laws of physics, one can produce phenomena that would otherwise not be naturally occurring. History, mythology, and theology all agree that the first practitioners of magic were in fact the dragons, before and or during their great war with the giants. From there, the ancient magics were passed on to the so-called lesser races, that would be us mortals, who discovered and refined multiple forms of magic over the millennia. In that time, we have settled upon a few theories as to how magic works on a larger scope, but it is nearly impossible to confirm definitively. What you'll learn in most Morgrave classes will be based off of the most dominant theory here in Corvair, which is called Siberian theory. The theory is simple in concept and goes like this. When the progenitor dragons died and formed a humble pocket of the material plane in the universe, Siberius's body came to line our planet with an asteroid belt filled with his latent pericausal energies. This energy was used by the progenitors in a time before creation to create the other planes. And with Siberius's body now circling our planet, that energy is slowly trickling off of his corpse from beyond our orbit, suffusing our world and imbuing the mundane with a fragment of his pericausal power. Thus, if you follow this line of thinking, magic can be defined as the ability to harness the remnants of Siberius's power and manifest it into various supernatural phenomena, which are then determined in shape and scope by methods used to harness that power. The reason different magic does not occur uniformly across all wielders is ultimately a difference in technique, training, and personal expression, at least according to Siberian theory. There are other theories, of course. According to the externalism school of thought, some people think that we draw directly upon the energy of the different planes and manifest them within the material plane, and we do so because different creatures maintain connections to the planes in different ways. This certainly has some merit, but fails to explain some innately magical effects that occur within the material plane without the input of other creatures. There is also a view known as sympathetic magic that teaches that magic is inherent to all objects and beings, and the ability to draw out and magnify such magic requires a mindset that communes with such magic. This is also a theory with merit, but many people consider it to be a little archaic and a dilution of Siberian theory. There are other theories too, like consensualism and the dominion theory, but the most prominent understanding of magical theory remains Siberian theory, so we'll be discussing magic primarily through its lens. In the world of magic, we generally divide magic into 3 categories: arcane, divine, and primal. Arcane magic is the most common form, and it can do almost anything that you can imagine by harnessing the raw power of the material and external planes, as well as physics. The best introduction to arcane magic would be through its most prolific form, wizardry. Wizardry is quite simply taking a scientific and academic approach to magic. By studying the effects of Siberius's power on the world and its creatures, wizards are able to reverse engineer supernatural phenomena into arcane formulae, which can then be learned, practiced, and further refined. Wizardry is the most common discipline of arcane magic, because most mages are able to study it with time and effort, and it requires no special heritage or innate position. While some people are certainly more inclined towards wizardry, this is less akin to any sort of inborn gift or set of powers, but rather a natural inclination towards the cerebral nature of the arcane sciences, like being a gifted mathematician or a writer. It is a skill that anyone can theoretically learn. Some are simply better suited for it. It is because of this accessible and studied nature that even those without a background in the arcane sciences are able to dabble in it, like yourself, to round off their skill set or expand their repertoire of ideas. That said, wizards are not naturally uniform. Like the hard sciences, there are categories and subcategories of science. Thus, wizards tend to pick a category of magic known as a school and specialize in it. Thus, you will find that the wizards you come across not only vastly vary in their ability, but also in their depth of knowledge on different subjects, which can be made even more varied by how wizards choose to apply their magic practically in their career and life. Oh, what's my specialty? I'm a diviner myself. Some people consider it to be a hokey school of wizardry that is all about seeing the future in bones or sprouting nonsensical prophecies. But divination is so much more than attempting to read the future. Divination is about knowledge, truth, communication. As a diviner, I specialize in reading minds, seeing the unseen, and even creating a telepathic network. In fact, last semester, I was able to use the Arcane Eye spell to remotely attend my Evocation 409 class while I was sick in bed. Yes, I can. In fact, seeing invisible objects is something of a signature skill amongst us diviners. Why do you... Oh, don't look so scared. I can't see under your clothes. It just means illusions don't work on me. Now, beyond wizardry, you have the practice of artifice, which can be just as demanding as wizardry, but much more mechanical and hands-on, and a little less academic. If wizardry is playing with the physics of the universe through arcane theories, then artifice is the much more practical application of said physics into everyday life, like engineering. Artificers specialize in crafting magically powered and imbued objects like wands, potions, or magical constructs which channel the blood of Sybaris. It is technical, and while innovation of these creations can be cerebral, practicing artifice can be as simple as learning to decipher and then follow the instructions to create an advanced magical item. I myself am not an artificer, but the ones I know typically invest their time not in developing their magical items, but also in mastering their usage, allowing them to apply their collection of tools to a vast array of situations. You may note that artifice is baked into our society, but that does not necessarily entail that we have an abundance of trained or master artificers. Some people in the trades learn the basics of artifice in order to serve our everyday needs, and these technicians are known as mage-rights, and they are both commonplace and necessary to our modern age. Delving into the less common forms of arcane magic, we have sorcery, which is regarded as something of a rarity. Sorcery is not a studied and academic discipline like wizardry. Most people are born with it. It is an innate power set which can be honed by study and practice, but is ultimately a fundamental gift they bear inherently. Some sorcerers are late bloomers. They are born with a fragment of Sybaris' power within them, like an extra muscle that simply lies dormant until it is awakened later in life. In some rarer cases, non-sorcerers are exposed to powerful magics or extraplanar influences that nestle within the body and develop into sorcery. But this is rare. Unlike wizardry, sorcery does not rely on typical arcane formulae or words of power to manipulate the ambient power of Siberius. Instead, they channel their own internal power outward, manifesting it from within like their own demiplane. Sorcery is shaped and honed by pure willpower, and as sorcerers flex and push the limits of their powers, they begin to unleash more power and unlock new abilities shaped by their experiences. In this regard, sorcery is much more akin to athletic training, and so sorcerers are more often found in adventuring, where their regular brushes with combat and danger require them to actively train their magic and hone their instincts in the pursuit of unlocking a deeper well of power. A similarly rare practice within arcane magic are bards. You may know a local bard, a layabout entertainer from a tavern who sings for their lunch and possibly chases skirts for dinner. I am not referring to such a person. A bard, with a capital B, is an arcanist who expresses magic rather than studying or manifesting it, where a wizard is an arcane scientist, and a sorcerer is something of an arcane athlete. A bard is an arcane artist. Like wizards, bards also manipulate the ambient power of Siberius through words of power, but rather than directing it through an arcane formula, they instead direct it like a conductor through an expression of art. Bards are commonly seen as musicians, but just as the arts are varied, so too are bards. Some bards are powerful orators and historians who recount ancient legendary stories, empowering allies or reviving such legends. Some are dancers who not only direct magic into spells, but direct their magic into their own bodies through dances or into weapons to fight alongside their allies. Some bards are even more mystical, delving into the esoteric, like card reading or the recounting of ghost stories. They literally manifest this esoteric art into magical phenomena. Unlike wizardry, bards do not have a uniform science that is easily learned and practiced. Much like the arts they practice, bardcraft requires a certain knack, a gift for the arts, self-expression, and also the ability to feel the magic around you rather than simply channel it. The last form of arcane practitioner can be even more esoteric, but is overall more common than sorcerers or bards, and that is the path of the warlock. Fundamentally speaking, a warlock is defined by drawing power inward from an external source of magical power, usually unfathomably powerful and often mysterious beings, which we refer to as patrons. These patrons are usually so immense in power that they do not or cannot manifest physically in the material plane, and so they forge a pact with a warlock, granting them a portion of their innate power in exchange for something else. These magical powers are extremely varied, and warlocks are difficult to categorize because of this variation. Two warlocks who draw from the same patron may receive radically different abilities, drawing on different aspects of a patron's power. Some warlocks posit that it is not only the patron's power who causes such variation, but that a warlock's personality and aptitude for certain skills further shapes what power they are open to receiving and manifesting. While some nations, like Ondare, have a proud tradition of producing warlocks amongst the noble families who cannot cultivate wizards or sorcerers, many warlocks run to patrons as a matter of desperation, accepting lopsided pacts in exchange for immediate power. And some warlocks take on a pact completely accidentally, or even against their will, never even having contacted their patron. Regardless of how warlocks come to be, what is notable is that warlocks definitively have the ability to manipulate the power of Syberis by drawing on the strength of their pact. Such power seems to require a powerful force of will, like sorcery, but growing such power seems to be relative to a warlock's strength of communion with their pact, rather than directly growing their innate talents. And that mostly covers our known arcane traditions. There are likely to be a few stray and esoteric methods of arcane magic you could learn out in the wild, but as for what is taught here at Morgrave, I'm certain I've covered it all. Do you have any questions for me before I continue further? No? Excellent. You seem excited to learn more. That's good to hear. Perhaps wizardry is a good choice for you, if simply listening to the basics are stimulating and pleasing to your ear. Or do you simply find my voice enjoyable to listen to? What? No, of course I'm not teasing you. That was a purely academic question. Well, if you're engaged enough to bandy about a bit of sarcasm, then you can certainly find the time and energy to continue learning. Next, we should move on to divine magic. This should be a brief overview, but it will be important nonetheless. Divine magic is broadly categorized by its connection to the plane of Eberron, a plane of life, light, and positive energies, or the plane of Mabar, a plane of death, darkness, and negative energies. Practitioners of divine magic generally have the ability to manipulate the powers of either plane by using the blood of Syberis to manifest phenomena from the planes. While most divine magic draws from Eberron, not all forms of faith or spirituality are inherently positive, and so those with more nefarious or compromised ideas draw their powers from the darkness of Mabar. Now, while many divine magic users would say that their powers come directly from their deity or faith, according to Siberian theory, their magic is still drawn from Syberis, and it is merely shaped by their faith and belief. Clerics, for instance, are the primary users of divine magic. It would be inaccurate to say that the clerics are simply clergy with access to magic. The principles of divine magic are fundamentally different in their approach to arcane magic. While it may appear on the surface that clerics simply utter a prayer and then manifest their magic, accessing such divine power is not as simple as believing in or praying for a miracle. Divine magic is not easily studied by the same magics that we use to observe arcane magic. But as far as we can tell, divine magic seems to work on a somewhat similar principle to sorcery, and that is the matter of willpower. However, unlike sorcerers, clerics do not force magic into the shape of miracles. Instead, their prayers act as words of power that enable Eberron or Mabar to intervene on their behalf, which might denote some level of will or sentience from the planes themselves. Or, depending on your view, the planes may lack sentience and are simply responding to the will and faith of the cleric. It is hard to say definitively, but what is known is that clerics must undergo rigorous training, just as any magic user does. But theirs differs from arcane training. It is still a sort of mental practice, but it is not inherently academic. It is philosophical and emotional. Anyone, magical or otherwise, can study theology. Anyone can pray for hours on end for healing or intercession. To become a cleric, one must train the mind to be open to the powers of other planes. That requires mental training to withstand the vast pressure and stress that the planes place on both the body and the soul. Channeling the planes is strenuous, so it is common for clerics to pair this mental fortitude training with physical fortitude training, honing the body as a means of meditation and focus. Before we can move further and discuss the other form of divine magic, we should discuss the silver flame and how the clerics differ from those of the sovereign host and other faiths. Their clerics do have the ability to draw on Eberron's and Mabar's energies to manifest their magic, but for the most part, their clerics draw power directly from the silver flame itself. Unlike the nature of gods, which, from an arcane and scientific standpoint, is still a matter of personal belief, the silver flame is indeed an observable phenomenon. The fact that so many can manifest the silver flame uniformly across the various sects of faith, even by using different words of power or different frameworks of faith, is proof enough that the silver flame is indeed a divine force working throughout the world, and not merely a common expression of magic. That brings up an uncomfortable question, though, or rather, a set of questions. If the silver flame is an observable divine force, why is it so limited in scope? If it is not omnipotent, is it truly divine? If it is not truly divine, is it merely another plane of power, like Eberron? But if it is as simple as another plane of power, why is it not observable or traversable like the other planes? If it is not a plane, then surely it must be some form of divinity. But does that negate the existence of other faiths? Does the mere existence of the silver flame disprove the entirety of vassal faith? These are all vital, but unanswered questions of faith that are unimportant to your studies in magic, unless you decide to pursue a path with divine magic. And of course, if you have personal questions of belief yourself. There is only one other common user of divine magic, the paladin. Ah, you've heard of paladins, have you? Yes, many have. They are the shining paragons of virtue and life. But the question is, which virtues? Whose life? Not considered that before, have you? Well, paladins are somewhat similar to warlocks in that they bind magical power with a sort of contract, though it is not exactly the same. Where warlocks form a pact with a direct being, knowingly or not, paladins connect themselves to the power of Eberron directly, forming a direct bond with the plane that binds a portion of its light energy directly to their own body and soul. Such power would normally be too much to handle, as even clerics rarely direct such torrent of power inward. So, to handle this issue, paladins bind their abilities with an oath. An oath is a set of words of power that permanently binds one's soul to Eberron. But it is not simply a contract you sign for power. These words of power come with restrictions, tenets, a way of life you must abide by forever. So long as these tenets are observed, your connection to Eberron remains strong, stable, and your ability to channel its power is gated for your safety. The tenets are not just ethical rules, however. It is a lifelong meditative state. Breaking from an oath violates your connection to Eberron, disrupting this meditative state, which then causes all sorts of issues. And for those who willfully violate their oath, their connection to Eberron is severed. And to fill its place, a surge of darkness from above will come rushing in like a tidal wave. These oath breakers are powerful. Like the plane they channel, they are walking conduits for darkness and the undead. While some people may become oathbreakers with good intentions, violating the sanctity of their oaths to achieve something they hold to be right, they nevertheless become walking pillars of accursed magic. While paladins are able to use divine magic on much the same principles that clerics do, they receive additional divine power granted to them by their oath. This could be a supernatural swiftness, protection from the elements, or even the ability to absorb the harm of others. These abilities are determined by what oath they swear and the tenets they live by, but they generally serve the paladin in whatever greater purpose they have sworn to follow. And that covers the divine magic wielders. Do you have any questions about that before we continue? Good, good. I'm glad you're following along. It'll make further sessions much easier. A good foundation is necessary for advanced magical work, but it will also serve you well if you venture out into the field as an adventurer. Knowledge of magic will prime you to face all manner of monsters, traps, and perhaps even rival adventurers, should you encounter them. The last broad category of magic we should cover is primal magic, which is somewhat smaller in scope compared to arcanism or theurgy. Primal magic at its core is fairly simple, even if most people consider it somewhat difficult to wield. It revolves around manipulating the forces of the natural world and channeling them outward, usually in the form of the elements or terrain manipulation. While this may sound like a lesser discipline of magic compared to the way that wizards can bend physics or clerics can manifest literal miracles, primal magic is far from weak. Primal magic, at its core, is about harnessing the natural processes of the world, both material and immaterial. Thus, a primalist does not merely fling about fire or grow plants. They also affect the wider, more mystical scope of nature. Calling upon the powers of magical beasts, channeling the cycle of life and death, even unleashing the might of cosmic forces like solar energy. As with all magic, it is still tied to the blood of Cyberius, which permeates the world, but this time is not about warping it. To wield primal magic is not about command, control, or surrender, but instead harmony and embodiment. Primal magic draws a little bit upon the theories put forward by the sympathetic magic school of thought, in that to use it, one must attenuate one's mind to the natural world and reach a state of harmony, where you trust the world to conform to your needs. Many describe it as an exercise in trust, but it can be very difficult to wield if you are not accustomed to the mental state required. Druids are the most common users of primal magic, and are something like priests of nature. Druids focus on the basic principles of primal magic by not just studying nature, but also literally embodying it. Druids are most famous for their shape-shifting powers, known often as wild shape. By communing with beasts, they learn how to take their shape in order to better live in harmony with nature and solidify their bond with it. In a similar way, Druids commune with all of nature, not just their immediate surroundings, but also far-reaching biomes and even the elemental planes. Within this communion, Druids find the wisdom to attain their harmony and effectively meditate on the meaning of words of power, which is how they direct their magic like most casters. While there is a broad spectrum of magic that is available broadly to any trained druid, some abilities are unique to the way a druid is trained, like a specialty. For example, some druids focus on their power to wild shape, while others may specialize in a section of magic like healing or the elements. Other than druids, the other primal magic users are rangers. Rangers differ from druids less in the way they commune with magic, and more in their use of it. Rangers often train beside druids, or in very similar manners, but rather than to serve as a bridge to the natural world, rangers seek to be guardians of it. Where druids typically use their powers to facilitate the growth of nature, rangers actively hunt down threats to nature and act as the counterbalance to potential disruptors of an ecosystem. However, rangers do not focus purely on their magical skill. Instead, they tend to blend magical ability with martial prowess and expertise in various skills. Because of this mixed skill set, rangers typically develop more martial spells as well, such as imbuing weapons with elemental effects or enhancing one's senses to supernaturally track foes or target weak points. Rangers undergo perhaps the most demanding style of training of any magic user because it emphasizes martial training, magical training, and mastering a wide variety of skills. This does, unfortunately, make it a less common discipline to see, even amongst adventurers, despite their natural inclination to wander in pursuit of the next great hunt. That covers the traditional archetypes of magic: arcane, divine, and primal. Now, with that covered, are there any other kinds of magic? Well, yes, beyond the traditional forms of caster, those who bind the blood of Cyberius into spells, there are some traditions of magic that fall outside of the trio, but they are not typically forms that you can train in or study. Like what? Well, covering all of them would require a few more sessions, but I suppose I can mention a few. You may know of monastic traditions from across the world. I am not personally familiar with how it works, but I do know that trained monks are people capable of developing a well of energy known as spiritual focus. You may also hear it referred to as ki. This focus is traditionally cultivated within the body and then directed outward to empower that body to accomplish supernatural tasks, such as moving at impossible speeds or honing the body to strike like a weapon. I know that monks do possess the ability to utilize their focus to produce magical effects, but I don't know the greater mechanics of it, as it falls outside the realm of magical classification. Focus could be a unique manifestation of the blood of Cyberius, but study of it is minimal and mostly relegated to conjecture at the moment. Then we come to psionics and their wielders, the scions. Psionics is a foreign concept to the traditions of magic, even more so than monastic focus. It is not a power natural to the material plane, and thus does not rely on the blood of Cyberius or any of the known methods for wielding magic. But what is psionics? Simply, our best working definition is this. Psionics is the ability to touch the plane of Zoriat with one's mind and draw upon its psychic energies to affect the material plane. By definition, psionics is magic, and scions are able to wield the immense power of the plane of Zoriat to produce spells that are recreations of our own well-known spells. But Zoriat, the plane of madness, is alien in both a literal and metaphorical sense. Zoriat and its power may be part of our cosmology, and it may be necessary to maintaining the laws of our universe, but it does not run on the same physics or rules that the other planes do. For that same reason, the power of psionics is alien as well, and well beyond our full understanding. Now, some spells do draw a little upon the power of Zoriard in order to instill madness or confusion on enemies, but that power is gated and still based on the principles of magic within our own plane. People who wield psionics open their minds not just to Zoriart's power, but also its corrupting influence. As the plane of madness, that influence has been known to drive more than a few scions insane, with understanding of things that we mortals are not intended to know. It is something that we do not teach here at Morgrave, and if it interests you, I recommend putting away such interest. No good can come of it. Now, of course, there are adventurers and warriors like yourself who battle primarily with physical weapons over magical means. But even amongst you, there are some traditions who develop magically based techniques that, again, defy typical spell classification. Fighters like yourself are warriors who train their body to effortlessly wield a wide range of weapons, fighting styles, and armors for any situation. But some fighters will expand their repertoire to include magical abilities, like Eldritch Knights who study wizardry, or the Psi Warriors who push their minds to unlock a portion of psionic power. Some warriors prefer a cloak and dagger approach to combat, using their wiles to expose enemy weak points and strike a foe's vitals. These rogues sometimes add magical tricks to their arsenal like fighters do, such as the arcane tricksters who use wizardry to enhance their methods, or the soul knives who conjure psychic weaponry to infect their foes' minds. Some warriors, the barbarians, use a deep-seated rage to hone their senses and bodies into engines of war. Sometimes these rages have a touch of magic infused into them, channeling primal magic outward, like the Wildhearts, who channel the spirits of animals to gain wild abilities, or the Zealots, who can channel divine magic to strike with holy might or heal themselves. And there you have it, all the forms of magic and abilities you could possibly study or train. As a fighter yourself, I'd say your best bet is to continue your current path as an Eldritch Knight and study wizardry. It will open a wide variety of opportunities to you during and away from any adventuring you do. With the last war finally over, you may find it to your advantage to have some non-combat training tucked away in your back pocket. And the arcane sciences are the ultimate tool for pursuing a career. But I'd like to hear what you think. Now that you know some more, are you interested in becoming an Eldritch Knight? I understand. It's a hard decision, certainly. And to be making such a big decision for such a huge time commitment and at so young an age can certainly be daunting. As a wizard myself, I am partial to studying the arcane sciences and learning arcana, but I would recommend taking some time to really explore your options. There is plenty of time to drop courses and start on a path you feel best reflects who you are and who you wish to become. Here, I shall jot down the names of some books that cover the basic concepts of the different magical traditions. You do not need to read them all. But if anything you heard today caught your interest, then I recommend you fetch one of the titles related to it and skim through it. Get a better feel for what you want to do. In the meantime, we'll continue our tutoring sessions into wizardry until you decide otherwise. I have some student colleagues who practice the other forms of magic that I would be happy to pair you up with if you decide to pursue another path and would like tutoring there as well. And here, your list. Everything should be available here in the library. I'm going to stick around a bit and work on some of my own research. You're welcome to stay if you wish to read anything I recommended. Regardless, thank you for staying and listening to my ramblings. I actually found it enjoyable to share my knowledge with you like this. And if you don't mind my saying so, I do hope you'll be back. Have a good evening.